There is a particular silence a house makes when everyone in it has already decided you are dead. I stood in my own living room and listened to it. The furnace ticked. A clock I did not recognize counted seconds on the wall, and on the mantel, where our wedding picture used to sit, there was a photograph of me draped in a black ribbon, the corner of the frame catching the afternoon light. My own face, in dress uniform, staring back at me from inside a memorial. I was still in my flight suit. I had crossed most of a world to get to that room. My boots were the same boots that had carried me out of a burning airfield in another country, and now they stood on my own rug, and the rug had been moved, and there was a coat on the hook by the door that was not mine. A woman stood halfway up my stairs with her hand over her mouth, and my husband stood in the kitchen doorway, gray in the face, holding a coffee cup that shook so hard it spilled over his fingers, and he looked at me the way you look at something that should not be able to look back. "You are not real," Shane said. "You cannot be real." I did not scream. I want you to understand that, because everything that comes after depends on it. I did not throw the photograph. I did not touch the woman on the stairs. Another voice, the one the army had spent 12 years training into me, told me to breathe, to observe, to count the exits, to write nothing off and touch nothing. So I looked at the mantel. I looked at the ribbon. I looked at the guest book lying open on the side table, a real guest book with real signatures from a service that real people had attended for me. "You cashed it," I said. He knew exactly what I meant. That was the first thing that told me the truth. He did not say cashed what. His mouth opened and nothing came out, and the cup kept shaking, and the woman on the stairs whispered a name that was not mine. Then someone knocked on the front door, 3 times, even and unhurried, the way an official knocks. I turned. Through the glass I could see a man in army service dress, a folder under his arm, his cover in his hand. But let me back up a little. 3 days earlier, I had been sitting in a plastic chair in a stateside terminal holding a small stuffed horse. It was brown with a black mane, the kind of soft toy that costs too much in an airport gift shop. And I bought it anyway because my daughter Sadie had been asking for a horse since before I left. I had a photograph of her on my phone, taken the morning I deployed. She was 5 in the picture, and she would be 5.5 now. And I had spent a long time in a hospital bed, working out exactly how many days I had missed and deciding I would not miss any more. I want to be honest about where I had been, because the rest of it does not make sense otherwise. In February, I had deployed with a Rotary Wing task force to an austere place with almost no communications. We flew UH-60 Blackhawks. I was a major by then, an aviator, 12 years in, and I had signed for aircraft worth more than every house on my street combined. Comms were a luxury out there. We got a satellite window some nights and not others. My family knew that going in. Sadie knew that Mommy's phone would go quiet sometimes and then come back. In the last week of March, everything went quiet for a reason I could not have explained to a 5-year-old. There was a mishap. That is the word the Army uses, and I will use it too, because the details are not the point of the story, and because some of the people in it did not come home, and they deserve more than a sentence in mine. An aircraft was lost. A crew member was killed. She was a woman close to my height and my build, and in the confusion of that night, with the wrong bag on the wrong airframe, and a manifest that had been changed twice in 6 hours, her remains and her effects were identified as mine. I was not on that aircraft. Hours earlier, I had swapped onto a different airframe to cover a maintenance issue. I was flying when it happened, and when my aircraft went down too, in a separate incident on the same terrible night, I was pulled out alive and unconscious and carried into a field hospital as an unidentified female, urgent surgical, no tags that anyone could read. So on the same night, at almost the same hour, one report said I was dead and one log said an unknown woman had arrived alive. The report traveled fast. The log sat in a hospital. By the time I woke up, 4 days had gone by, and the notification had already crossed an ocean and knocked on my own front door. I remember the waking in pieces, a ceiling of canvas and then a ceiling of tile, a nurse with kind, exhausted eyes who kept calling me by no name at all, because for the first 2 days I did not have one. My head felt like a struck bell. When I could finally hold a thought, the first thought I held was Sadie, and the second was Shane, and I asked for a phone. They brought me a phone eventually at a stateside hospital, and I dialed my own house, and a recording told me the number was not in service. I dialed Shane's cell, and it rang once, and went to a voicemail that was full. I dialed Roberta, and it rang out. I told myself the satellite windows were bad, that the deployment had scrambled the accounts, that a disconnected number was a billing problem and nothing more. A person who has just learned to walk down a hospital corridor again does not let herself think the word funeral. "Is there someone we can call for you?" a caseworker asked me on the 5th or 6th day. "I have been trying," I said. "Nobody's answering. I think something is wrong with the phones." She wrote something down and did not meet my eyes. And I know now that she knew more than I did, that somewhere in the system, the two versions of me had not finished fighting, and no one wanted to be the person who told a recovering patient that her own family had buried her. So no one did. They cleared me slowly, and they put me on a plane, and they let me go home to find it out myself. I did not know any of that in the terminal. I only knew that I had finally cleared the medical hold, that my head still rang some mornings, that I had a horse in a paper bag and a surprise in my chest, and that I had decided not to call ahead because I wanted to see Sadie's face when the door opened. I remember the woman at the rental counter asking if I was coming or going. "Home," I said. "I am going home." The drive took 40 minutes. The neighborhood looked the way neighborhoods do. Sprinklers going, a recycling bin on its side. I had the driver slow at the corner because my heart was doing something complicated, and that was when the first cold thread of wrong went through me. There was a boat in my driveway. It was on a trailer, white and new, with a temporary tag in the window. I did not own a boat. Shane had wanted one for years, and we had never had the money. And now there was one sitting on the concrete where my car used to go, and the curtains in the front window were a color I had never chosen. "Somebody new must have moved in," the driver said, watching me in the mirror. "Been cars there for months. Real busy house." "It is my house," I said. He did not know what to do with that, so he said nothing, and I paid him, and I stood on the sidewalk with my bag on my shoulder and the horse in my hand, and I walked up my own driveway past a boat I had never seen. My key did not fit the lock. I stood there and tried it twice, and it would not turn, and a small part of me was almost relieved, because a change lock was a small wrong, a fixable wrong, the kind of thing a deployment does to a marriage. Maybe he had lost a key. Maybe there had been a break-in. I told myself an ordinary story because the ordinary story was the only one I could stand. Then a voice said my name from the next yard over. Bex Kirby had lived beside us for 6 years. She was 58, sharp, the kind of neighbor who knew everyone's schedule and judged no one out loud. She was standing at the edge of her lawn with a garden hose going slack in her hand, and she was looking at me the way Shane would look at me 20 minutes later, like a door had opened onto something impossible. "Colette," she said. "Honey, no." "Bex," I said. "The lock is stuck." She came across the grass fast for a woman her age. She got close and she reached out and she put 2 fingers on my arm. Actual fingers, actual pressure, as if she needed to confirm I had weight. "They told us you were killed," she said. Her voice broke on the last word. "There was a service. In May. Colette, there was a service. Your picture. Your husband cried in the front row. Your little girl wore a white dress." The horse was very heavy in my hand. "Where is Sadie?" I said. "With his mother mostly," Beck said. "The last month or so. Since." She stopped. She looked at the boat and then at the new curtains, and something in her face turned from grief to a harder thing. "There is a woman living here now," she said quietly. "I did not want to be the one. I kept the spare key you gave me. They changed the locks in April." April. I had been alive in April. I had been in a hospital bed, learning my own name again in April. "I need to go inside," I said. "Use my key," Beck said, and pressed it into my palm. And then she said the thing that decided the next 3 months of my life. "Colette, be careful. Whatever is in there, be careful. You are the one holding the truth, and people who have already spent the truth do not like it walking back in the door." I have thought about that sentence a great deal since. The key turned. The house smelled wrong. Not bad. Just wrong. A different detergent, a different candle, someone else's idea of home laid over the bones of mine. And there was the mantle. And there was the ribbon. And there was my own face inside a frame with a date under it, a date in March, the day the report said I died. I did not go straight for it. I made myself walk the rooms first, quietly, the way you walk a landing zone. And in every room I found another version of the same fact. In the hallway, a printed program from a memorial service, in loving memory of Major Colette Whitlock. Numbers I recognized, my own birth year, my rank, a Bible verse Shane knew I did not care for. On the refrigerator, a magnet holding a card from a funeral home. On the kitchen counter, a stack of documents held down by a mug, and I did not touch them, but I read the top page from where I stood, and the top page said, "Petition for guardianship of a minor," and under it a line that named Shane's mother, Roberta, as proposed guardian of Sadie. And on the same counter, a bank statement, printed, folded, and even folded, I could see the number on it, because someone had highlighted it in yellow. A deposit, $400,000. And below it, in the weeks after, the balance walking down and down. $400,000 is what the Army pays a beneficiary when a soldier dies. It is the maximum coverage under the Service Members Group life insurance policy. Shane was my beneficiary. I had made him my beneficiary the week we married, sitting at a folding table with a form, because that is what you do, because you love someone and you cannot imagine them turning your death into a down payment. I counted 4 lies before I finished counting the rooms. That was when I heard the woman on the stairs and the coffee cup in the kitchen, and I stepped into the living room, and Shane turned around and saw me, and the world I have already shown you began. "You are not real," he said again. "I flew home," I said. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. The number was disconnected." The woman on the stairs found her voice. "Shane," she said. "Shane, who is this?" He did not answer her. He was looking at the ribbon on the mantel and then at me, back and forth, as if one of us had to be a hallucination and he was deciding which. "Kendra," he said finally, to the stairs, not to me. "Go upstairs." Kendra did not go upstairs. She came down 2 more steps and she looked at me, and I watched her put it together, the flight suit, the face on the mantel, the face in the doorway, and I watched the color leave her the way it had left him. "That is a photo of you," she said to me, not a question. "It is a photo of me at a funeral for me," I said. "Yes." On the counter, a phone was ringing. Shane looked at it and did not move, so it rang out, and then it rang again. And this time a woman's voice came out of the speaker because the call had connected on its own, the way old phones do. "Shane," the voice said. "Roberta." I would know Roberta's voice at the bottom of the ocean. "Shane, Kendra texted me something insane. She said a woman is there saying she is Colette. Whoever that is, it is a sick joke. We buried her. Do you hear me? We buried that girl. Call the police." "Hello, Roberta," I said, loud enough for the phone. There was a silence on the line that I will remember for the rest of my life. It was the silence of a woman recalculating everything at once. And then Roberta said, in a voice gone thin and fast, "That is not possible. That is not her. Shane, Shane, hang up the phone." He hung up the phone. "Shane," Kendra's voice had gone high and strange. "You told me she left. You told me she took off on you and the baby and never looked back. You told me there was a divorce." She looked around the room, at the ribbon, at the guest book, and her hand found the banister. "Why is there a funeral picture? Why did you tell me she left if there was a funeral?" "Kendra, not now," Shane said. "You said different things," Kendra said. "You said different things to different people." She was crying now, the ugly kind, and I felt a strange thing, which was that I did not hate her. She looked like a person who had just found the edge of a hole she had been standing near for months. "I want to understand the timeline," I said. I kept my voice flat, the way you keep it flat on a radio when everything is on fire. "In March, the Army told you I was dead. In April, $400,000 went into our account. Somewhere in there, you told the neighbors I was gone, and you told her I left you, and you moved her into this house, and you filed to give our daughter to your mother. Is that the order it happened in?" "Do not do that," Shane said. "Do not stand there and make it sound like a scheme." "I got a knock on the door in the middle of the night, Colette. 2 men in uniform. They told me my wife was dead. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "I have some idea," I said. "I have been dead." It was very quiet. He flinched. "I grieved you," he said. "I stood at the front of a church and I grieved you." "And then you bought a boat," I said. The word landed in the room and sat there. Kendra looked at the window, at the white hull on the trailer, and something closed in her face. "That is not fair," Shane said, but the fight had gone thin in his voice. "Because there is no fair way to explain a boat." I did not raise my voice. I looked at the counter, at the guardianship petition under the mug, and I made myself memorize the layout of the room, the papers, the account statement, the exact place everything sat, because Bex's warning was running under everything now, like a current. Observe. Collect. Do not detonate. And I looked at my husband across the room, where we had brought our daughter home from the hospital, and I said the sentence that Bex had been afraid of, the one that was the beginning of my whole case, and I did not even know it yet. "You cashed it," I said. "You knew, and you cashed it." "I did not know," he said. Too fast. "I did not know, Colette. I swear to God they told me. They told me you were gone. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to answer the phone when they called to check," I said. I did not know yet that this was true. I said it because it was the shape of the thing, the shape I could feel even in the dark. And I watched it land on him. I watched his face do something that no innocent face does. And that was when the knock came. 3 knocks. Even. Unhurried. Through the glass, a man in army service dress, a folder under his arm. I opened my own front door with another woman's spare key still warm in my other hand. The man on the step was in his early 40s, close-cropped, a major's gold oak leaf on his shoulders, a casualty assistant's name I would come to know very well. He looked at me and he went absolutely still, the way you go still when a fact you have been chasing turns around and looks at you. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I am Major Silas Corbin. I am a casualty assistance officer. I am looking for the household of Major Colette Whitlock." "You found her," I said. "I am Major Colette Whitlock." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something in his face I had not seen from anyone yet that day. Not shock, relief, and under it, a cold professional anger that was not aimed at me. "Ma'am," he said, "the Army owes you an apology and a very long conversation. May I come in?" I stepped back and led him into my own house. He took in the room the way I had, the ribbon, the guest book, the boat visible through the window, Shane against the far wall, Kendra frozen on the stairs. His jaw worked once. "I have been trying to reach this household for 11 days, carpe diems," Corbin said. "I was the officer assigned when the notification went out in the spring. When the identification was corrected, the case was flagged, and it became my job to make the correction in person and to explain what happens next. Every number I had was disconnected or unanswered. I finally came to the door." "Corrected," Shane said. His voice cracked in the middle of the word. Corbin turned to him with a patience that was worse than anger. "The report that closed in the spring was based on a misidentification," he said. "The remains and effects attributed to Major Whitlock were not hers. Major Whitlock was admitted alive as an unidentified patient the same night. The identification was corrected. That correction has been working its way through the system for weeks." "Then why did nobody tell me?" Shane said, and I almost admired it, the speed with which he reached for the story where he was the victim. "Because the notifications went to the primary next of kin," Corbin said. "They went to you. You are the beneficiary of record and the emergency point of contact." He opened his folder. He did not raise his voice. "Mr. Whitlock, our records show 2 separate attempts to reach you to verify identifying information before the insurance disbursement was finalized. A phone call on the 2nd of April and a certified letter on the 9th. Do you remember them?" The room did a thing rooms do when the floor shifts. Kendra's head turned toward Shane. Roberta was not there, and yet I felt her turn too, somewhere across town. And Shane, my husband, the man I had made my beneficiary at a folding table because I loved him, looked at the casualty assistance officer standing in his stolen living room and said, No, I never got any of that." Corbin let the silence hold a beat longer than was comfortable. That I would learn was a thing he did on purpose. "I will note that you say so," he said. "The records will say what the records say. A certified letter has a tracking number and a signature card. A phone call has a log. Those are not things I decide. Those are things that already exist." He turned a page in his folder without looking down. "What I decide is only this. Whether, standing here today, I believe a household received 2 official contacts about a discrepancy in an identification and did nothing. And Mr. Whitlock, I have been doing this a long time. I know what a household looks like when it is surprised by good news, and I know what one looks like when it is surprised by being caught. I'm going to let the paperwork tell the rest." "You cannot come into my house and accuse me," Shane said. "I am not accusing you of anything," Corbin said, and he was so calm it was almost gentle. "I am telling you the sequence of events the Army recorded, and I am watching your face. Those are different activities." He closed the folder. "The accusing, if there is any, happens in a different building, by different people, on a different day. My job today was to find Major Whitlock, confirm she's alive, and make sure her daughter is not handed to anyone on the strength of a report that is being torn up. I have done the first 2. We are going to do the 3rd right now." "2 notifications," I said quietly, "to verify." Shane would not look at me. Corbin wrote something in his folder. "There will be a full review," he said. "Ma'am, right now, the most important things are these. You are alive, and we will restore that on paper as fast as the law allows, which is not as fast as either of us would like. Second, there is a pending guardianship matter regarding your daughter that must be stopped immediately because it is built on a death that did not occur. Third, there is the question of the disbursement. He paused. That last one is not mine to resolve. But I will tell you plainly. When a payment is made on a report that is later rescinded, the money is owed back. And when there is reason to believe someone had noticed and concealed it, that becomes a different kind of matter entirely. He handed me a card, 2 names on it, his, and a legal assistance attorney at the nearest installation. Do not sign anything, he told me. Do not agree to anything. Go to that office tomorrow. You have been through something almost no one goes through, and I am sorry it is going to require paperwork to fix. But paperwork is exactly how you are going to win. I looked at the card. I looked at the mantel. I looked at my husband against the wall, and the woman on the stairs, and the guardianship petition under a coffee mug on my own counter. Where is my daughter right now? I said. With his mother, Kendra said, before Shane could shape it. Her voice was very small. She has been with Roberta since the service. Shane, I did not know. You told me she left you. You told me she was gone. I did not sleep that night. I stayed with Bex in her spare room with the horse on the nightstand, and I made a list. I have made a lot of lists in my life. Pre-flight checklists, load plans, casualty cards. A list is how I think when the ground is moving, so I sat up in a stranger's guest bed at 2 a.m, and I wrote down every fact I had, in order, the way I would brief it. 1. There is a memorial photograph of me in a program from a service. Someone declared me dead in a way that was public and documented. 2. There is a bank deposit of $400,000 and a balance that walks down over the following months. The money came and the money went. 3. There is a boat in the driveway with a temporary tag. 4. There is a woman living in my house who says she was told I left him. 5. There is a guardianship petition naming Roberta as proposed guardian of my living child. 6. A casualty assistance officer says 2 notices went to my husband before the money paid out, and he says he never got them, and his face when he said it was the face of a man who was lying. 7. I have my own records. I carried them home in my own bag. That last one was the one I kept coming back to. Because here's the thing the people who erased me did not know. When a soldier is medically evacuated and moved through a chain of hospitals, she accumulates paper. And when that soldier is an aviator with a head injury and a suspicious, careful mind, and she starts to suspect that something has gone very wrong at home because no one will answer her calls, she starts keeping copies. I had a manila envelope in my bag with my aeromedical evacuation summary, my admission record, my patient identification band cut carefully off my own wrist, and a discharge summary with my thumbprint on it, taken when I could finally be positively identified. I had signed for helicopters worth more than that house. I knew how to build a file. In the morning, I went to the legal assistance office and I met Rachel Ndiaye. She was 44, an Army attorney, calm in the specific way of people who have watched the system do terrible things slowly and have learned exactly where to put the lever. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said the sentence that organized everything after it. Being alive is not automatic on paper, she said. I know how that sounds. You are sitting right here, but the law moved a piece when that report closed, and we have to move it back, deliberately, with proof. And there are 2 fights, not one. And you have to hold them apart in your head, or you will lose both. Tell me the 2 fights, I said. The first fight is that you are alive, she said. We file to vacate the declaration of death and to stop the guardianship cold. That fight you win with hospital records and a thumbprint. It is almost mechanical. It just takes a judge. And the second fight is the money, Rachel said. $400,000 paid to your husband on your death. If he simply received it in good faith and spent it, that is a debt, and debts get repaid, painfully, over years. She leaned forward. But if he knew you were alive, or had real reason to know, and he took the money anyway, and hid the correction and pushed a guardianship so no one would look too closely, that is not a debt. That is fraud. And the difference between those 2 things is a single question. Did he know? The casualty assistance officer said 2 notifications went to him, I said. Sent is not received, Rachel said. He will say the letter got lost and the call went to voicemail. We need more than sent. We need him, in his own words, showing that he knew. She wrote a word on her pad and turned it toward me. Knew. Everything we do for the next month is aimed at that word. Now, show me what you carried home. I put the manila envelope on her desk and I opened it, and I watched a professional's eyes change. "Colette," she said, and it was the first time she used my first name. "This is the whole first fight sitting in an envelope. Do you understand that most people in your position have nothing? They are trying to prove they are alive with a face and a driver's license and a lot of crying. You brought me a chain of custody." She looked up. "You kept your own admission band." "I cut it off my wrist in the hospital and I put it in the envelope," I said. "I did not know why. Something felt wrong at home and I could not name it, so I kept everything with my name near it." "That instinct is the reason this is going to take weeks instead of years," she said. "There was a second, smaller fight nobody warns you about, and I want to describe it because it is the strangest part of being declared dead. You have to be put back together, one office at a time. I spent days that month proving I was alive to computers. My military identification card had been deactivated. My common access card would not open a door. When I went to the personnel office to fix it, a young specialist typed my number in and frowned at the screen because the screen told him I was deceased, and he looked up at me with the particular fear of a person whose system disagrees with his eyes. "Ma'am, it is showing," he said, and stopped. "It is showing a status I cannot change from this desk." "I know what it is showing," I said. "I am standing here. Who can change it?" It took a supervisor, and then a form, and then a different supervisor. My bank had frozen the account I had funneled through an allotment because deceased soldiers do not need checking accounts. My daughter's school had me listed as a deceased parent and had, at Roberta's request, added Roberta as an emergency contact. Every one of these was a small door that had been locked from the far side while I was gone, and every one of them had to be opened by a stranger who first had to believe that the woman in front of them was not a clerical error. "You will feel like you are begging to exist," Rachel had warned me. "You are not. You are alive, and they are catching up. Make them catch up. Sign nothing that says otherwise." I did not sign anything that said otherwise. The first fight, she had said, was almost mechanical. It was not painless, but she was right that it was clean. Over the next 2 weeks, the file grew, and every piece of it was a small, hard fact that no amount of grief theater could argue with. The aeromedical evacuation summary came first, officially this time, requested through channels. It listed a female patient, urgent surgical, admitted at 11:40 at night on the same date the memorial program listed as my death. 11:40 at night, alive, in a field hospital. The report that killed me had gone out at 10. For an hour and 40 minutes, by the paper's own hand, I was both dead and alive. And only one of those had a heartbeat attached to it. "The hospital says you arrived alive at 11:40, Rachel told me, laying the two documents side by side on her desk. "The report says you died at 10. Both cannot be true, and a hospital admission with vitals beats a report built on a bag." Then came the manifest. This was the piece I had not been able to get myself, the one that required the unit to dig. It was the flight manifest for the aircraft that was lost, the real one, the corrected one, and my name was not on it. Where my name would have been, there was another name, a crew member who had been assigned in my place after I swapped airframes. The document was a hard, unbearable thing to read because a woman had died and her identity had been given to me and mine to her, and untangling that meant looking straight at the fact of her. I made myself look. She deserved to be looked at. "You were never aboard," Rachel said quietly. "The airframe that burned was not yours. The manifest proves it. Between the manifest and the admission log, there is no version of the facts where you are dead. There has not been since the last week of March. Everyone who kept saying it after that was either wrong or choosing not to know. My old commander called me that week. He had heard. The way the Army hears things, and he did not waste my time with speeches. 'I want to tell you 3 things,' he said. 'And then I want you to tell me what you need. 1. Nobody in this formation ever stopped believing you were coming back until the report closed, and when it reopened, the whole unit exhaled. 2. Whatever you need, pulled, signed, or testified to, you will have it today, not next week. 3. He paused. I have written a lot of letters to families this year. I never thought I would get to make a phone call in the other direction. I am glad it is yours. 'I need the manifest, sir,' I said. 'The real one. And I need someone who can authenticate the medical evacuation record in a courtroom if it comes to that.' 'Done and done,' he said. 'Both are moving before we hang up. What else?' 'That is all,' I said. 'That is more than most people get.' 'You are not most people,' he said. 'You are one of mine, and the paperwork got you wrong, and we are going to make the paperwork say sorry.' I hung up and I sat in my rented room and I let myself cry for exactly the length of that phone call. And then I stopped and I went back to the folder. There is a kind of crying that empties you and a kind that fuels you. And I had learned by then to only allow the second kind, and only in short, controlled bursts, like venting pressure so a seal does not blow. For the first time since I had walked into that living room, I was not the only one holding a fact. Now the facts were in a folder with a government letterhead, and they were mine. And then the certified letter came back to haunt the man who said he never got it. Rachel had subpoenaed the delivery record for the letter Corbin had mentioned, the one sent on the 9th of April. It came back with a scanned signature card, and on the signature card, in the box for the person who accepted delivery, was a signature. It was not perfectly legible, but it did not have to be. It was signed at our address on the 10th of April at 10 in the morning, and the first initial was an S. He will say his mother signed it, or a neighbor, or that he does not recognize it, Rachel said, sliding the card across the desk to me. It does not matter as much as you would think. Here is what matters. A certified letter about a discrepancy in your wife's death was delivered to your door and signed for, before you finalized a $400,000 claim. Whether the pen was in his hand or his mother's, that household knew there was a question, and a reasonable person, holding that letter, asks the question before they spend the money. I looked at the S for a long time. We had a code, I told her. When I deployed, if anything ever happened to me, he was supposed to make sure Sadie knew I did not choose to leave, that I was coming back until the second I could not. I put the card down. He got a letter that said maybe I was coming back after all, and he signed for it, and he let it ride. Rachel did not say anything to that. There was nothing to say. She just added the signature card to the folder, behind the admission log and the manifest, and the folder was getting heavy now, heavy in the specific way that means a thing is becoming undeniable. And then, in the middle of the clean fight, the clock turned ugly. Roberta moved the guardianship hearing up. I found out from Rachel, who found out from the court docket. The petition to make Roberta the guardian of my daughter, filed while I was declared dead, had been fast-tracked, and there was a hearing date 2 weeks out, and Sadie was living in Roberta's house, and every night that I was not her legal anything was a night a stranger's signature could decide my child's life. I will not pretend I stayed calm about that part. I sat in Rachel's office, and my hands would not stop, and she let me shake, and then she put a piece of paper in front of me. We file an emergency motion tomorrow, she said. You are the biological mother, and you are demonstrably alive. No court in this country keeps a guardianship going against a living, fit parent once the death is disproven. The hearing that was going to hand her to Roberta is going to become the hearing where we hand her back to you. We are going to take the weapon they built and use it as the venue. She looked at me. But I need you to hold discipline 2 more weeks. Do not go to Roberta's house. Do not take Sadie in the night, however much every cell in your body is telling you to. If you do, you hand them the only story they have left, that you are unstable. Let the paper do it. Let the paper do it, I repeated. It became a thing I said to myself, over and over, driving past streets I could not turn down. The emergency motion went in the next morning. It asked the court to suspend the guardianship proceeding on the grounds that the sole basis for it, the death of the parent, was disproven by the attached hospital records. It asked for an expedited hearing, and it asked, in careful lawyer language that I read 4 times, that the child not be removed from the jurisdiction or from her existing school and routine while the matter was resolved, because whatever else was true, Sadie had already lost a mother once that year and did not need her whole world moved again. That last part was Rachel's idea. Judges have children, she said. Remind them there is a 5-year-old at the center of this who thinks her mother is dead. Not to be manipulative, because it is true, and because it will keep everyone honest about the clock. I spent those 2 weeks in a rented room learning a new kind of patience. It is one thing to hold discipline under fire, when the training takes over and your hands know what to do. It is another thing entirely to hold discipline in a quiet room at night, knowing your daughter is asleep across town in a house that filed papers to keep her from you and to not get in the car. I did not get in the car. I want that on the record, too. Every night I did not get in the car, and every morning Rachel called to tell me the paper was moving, and I chose the paper. Beck sat with me some of those nights. She did not say much. She would bring over a plate and put the television on low and be a body in the room, which is a thing you do not know the value of until you have been declared dead and have to sit alone with the fact of being alive. The second fight. The money, cracked open from a direction I did not expect. It came from inside the family. Roberta had an old phone, a cheap one she kept in a drawer and used for nothing, and it had been in a box of things a shaken relative was clearing out, because in the confusion of a family that thought it had lost me and then learned it had not, People started opening drawers. And on that old phone was a voicemail, saved from the second week of April. The relative who found it was Shane's aunt. She asked me to keep her out of the rest of it, and I will, so I will only say this. A member of Shane's own family listened to that voicemail, and then she drove to the legal assistance office, and she put the phone on Rachel's desk, and she sat down across from me with her coat still on. I loved that boy his whole life, she said. I held him the day he was born, and I'm going to sit here while you play it because somebody in this family has to look at it straight. She folded her hands. Play it anyway. We played it. It was Shane's voice. He was talking to his mother. And what he said in the flat, everyday tone of a man discussing a chore was this. The Army called twice about the ID. Something about a discrepancy. They wanted to confirm details before the payout cleared. I let it ride. If it is a mistake, it is their mistake, not ours. The money is in. We are not giving it back. Do not call them back, Mom. Do not stir it. I let it ride. Rachel did not move for a long moment. Then she said very softly, that sentence is worth more than every form we filed. Because there it was. Not sent. Received. Not a lost letter, not a missed voicemail. Him, saying that the Army had called twice about a discrepancy in the identification before the money cleared and that he had chosen to let it ride and told his mother to bury it. He had a doubt handed to him, an official doubt, a chance to ask the one question, is my wife actually dead? And he decided that $400,000 was worth not asking. Then we followed the money, because now the money was a story with a spine. The $400,000 had landed in the joint account in April. From there, it had moved fast. A wire of $40,000 to an account in Kendra's name, marked as a loan, a cash purchase of a boat, $31,000, the boat I had walked past in my own driveway, a down payment on a second property, a new truck, and underneath all of it, the slow domestic bleed of a man spending a windfall he had already decided was his. Special Agent Dominic Farrow of Army CID walked the trail with us. He was 39, methodical, unimpressed by everyone, and he confirmed the corrected identification through the thumbprint and formally flagged the declaration of death file. He listened to the voicemail twice. On the second listen, he wrote a single word in his notebook and underlined it, and I did not have to see it to know it was the same word Rachel had written on the first day. People think fraud is complicated, Farrow told me, closing his notebook. It almost never is. It is usually one person deciding a bad minute is easier than a hard question. He had a hard question in front of him. Is my wife alive? He decided the money was easier. That is the whole case. The last piece came from Kendra, and it came without my asking. She reached out to Rachel's office through her own lawyer a week before the hearing, and she gave a statement, and I was allowed to read it. It was not a noble document. She was protecting herself, and I understood that. But it was useful, and more than useful, it was true. She had met Shane in the winter, she said, before I deployed and before anything happened to me. He had told her he was separated. After the notification, he told her I had actually left months earlier, that the deployment story was a cover, that the funeral was for show to keep my family from suing over the money. He told her a different story every time the last one sprang a leak. And then there was the line that I have thought about since. Near the end of her statement, Kendra wrote, I asked him once why there were no pictures of the wife in any of the boxes if she had really just walked out. He said she took them all. But there was a whole framed one on the mantel with a ribbon on it. I stopped asking questions I did not want the answer to. I am not proud of that. I stopped asking questions I did not want the answer to. I read that sentence, and I felt the thing I had been refusing to feel for weeks, which was not rage. It was grief for the marriage I thought I had, the one where the man at the folding table would have driven to the ends of the earth to confirm I was alive, instead of the man who signed for the letter and let it ride. That marriage had died in March, on paper, at 10 at night. The difference was that I was the only one who had waited to bury it. You do not have to feel sorry for her, Rachel said, watching my face. I do not, I said. But she asked a question and got a lie, same as me. She just got out cheaper. The hearing was in the county probate court on a Tuesday morning in the first week of August. I wore my service uniform. I want to tell you I wore it out of strategy because Rachel had told me the room needed to see a living soldier and not a grieving widow. And that was true. But I also wore it because I had earned it, and because for months a photograph of me in it had been sitting on a mantel behind a black ribbon, and I wanted to walk into a room and be the uniform instead of the photo. Sadie was not in the courtroom. Rachel had arranged that carefully, but she was down the hall with a court advocate, and she knew I was alive now because 3 days earlier I had finally been allowed to see her, and I'm not going to describe that here because some things are mine, and a 5-year-old's face when she realizes the funeral was wrong is one of them. Roberta was there, in navy, with her hands folded. Shane was there, gray again, beside a probate attorney named Rex Tanner. Kendra was not there. Kendra, it turned out, had moved out of my house the same week Corbin knocked on the door and had given a statement to Pharaoh that began with the words he told me she left him and got more useful from there. Judge Naomi Prentice ran her court the way good judges do, without drama, with a low tolerance for it. She had read the file. You could tell within the first minute that she had read the file. Rachel laid it out cleanly: the petition to vacate the declaration of death, the petition to dismiss the guardianship, the aeromedical admission log at 11:40, the corrected manifest, the thumbprint identification. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. Corbin testified first. He walked the court through the notification process the way a man walks you through a machine he respects and is ashamed of at the same time. He explained how the report had closed and how the identification had been corrected and what a casualty assistance officer is supposed to do, and what he had done, and the 11 days he had spent trying to reach a household that would not answer its door. In your experience, Rachel asked him, when a correction like this is issued, does the beneficiary usually know before you reach them? Objection, Tanner said. Speculation. I will allow it narrowly, Judge Prentice said. His experience is why he is here. In my experience, Ian Corbin said, the beneficiary often knows first, because the system contacts the beneficiary to verify details before it pays. If there is a discrepancy, that is exactly when the beneficiary hears about it. Before the money, not after. I watched Shane's jaw tighten at before the money, not after. Then Rachel put the admission log and the death report on a screen, side by side, and asked the court to note the 2 times, 10 at night and 11:40 at night, and asked a question that did not need an answer. Which of these documents has a pulse attached to it? She said. Tanner tried, because it was his job to try. He said his client had acted in good faith on an official notification, that grief is not a crime, that the family had genuinely believed the worst. He asked to question me, and Judge Prentice allowed it, and I sat in the box in my uniform and answered a man who was being paid to find a crack in the fact that I was alive. Major Whitlock, Tanner said, isn't it possible your husband simply never received these later notices? That in his grief, mail went unopened, calls went unheard? It is possible a person misses one thing in grief, I said. It is not possible to miss a certified letter you signed for, a phone call you were warned about, and a living wife, and still find time to buy a boat and file for guardianship of her child. Grief slows people down. It did not slow this down at all. Tanner did not ask me a second question. That is how you know the first one went badly for him. And then Rachel asked the court's permission to play a voicemail, and the room got very quiet, and Shane's own voice came out into the record. The Army called twice about the ID. I let it ride. We are not giving it back. Do not stir it. I watched Roberta's hands come apart in her lap. I watched Shane close his eyes. I watched Rex Tanner set down his pen with the specific care of a man who has just understood that the rest of the hearing is a formality. Judge Prentice looked at the documents in front of her for a long moment. Then she looked at me, standing there alive in my uniform, and she looked at Shane. The court finds, she said, that the petitioner, Major Colette Whitlock, is manifestly and abundantly alive. The declaration of death is vacated in full. The petition for guardianship is denied, and I will say for the record that it should never have been filed once there was a living parent, and that the speed with which it was pursued does the petitioners no credit. She turned a page. The court further finds, on the evidence of the respondent's own recorded statement, that the respondent had actual notice of a discrepancy in the identification prior to the disbursement of the insurance proceeds, and elected to conceal it. That finding is referred, along with this record, to the appropriate authorities. The $400,000 in proceeds is subject to recovery, and this court will order it restored in full with the mechanism to be determined. Then she asked me if I wished to say anything, which judges do not always do and which I had not expected. I stood up. I had rehearsed nothing. Your Honor, I said, I did not come home for the money. I want to be clear about that because I am about to ask the court to do something with it. When the recovery happens, I would ask that every dollar go into a trust for my daughter, not to me, to her. She wore a white dress to a funeral for a mother who was not dead. Let the money that was taken because I was declared gone be the money that pays for her someday. That is the only version of it I can stand to touch. Judge Prentice looked at me for a moment. This was never about winning, I said. It was about being counted as alive by the people who should have looked hardest, and one of them chose the money instead of the question. I do not need to see him ruined. I needed a court to write down that I am here. You have done that. That is enough for me. The judge did something small then. She nodded, once, the way one professional nods at another. The recovered proceeds will be placed in trust for the minor child, she said. Ordered. And she brought the gavel down, and on a form somewhere, my daughter's name was written where $400,000 would go. And I was, on paper and in the world, alive. There was a decision waiting for me after that, and it was harder than the hearing. The referral Judge Prentice had made put the fraud in the hands of people who could pursue it hard. Special Agent Farrow came to see me and laid out, plainly, what the different roads looked like. The concealment was provable. The voicemail and the signature card and the money trail were, in his flat words, a clean file. If I pushed and the prosecutor agreed, Shane was looking at a felony, and felonies leave a mark that a 5-year-old eventually learns to read. I am not here to talk you into anything, Farrow said. The money comes back either way. The order stands either way. This part is about what you want on the record and about your daughter, and that is yours to weigh, not mine. I thought about it for 3 days. I decided that the money would come back because it belonged to Sadie now and that I would support the recovery all the way, but I told the prosecutor I would not seek the harshest charge available, and I would say so in writing for one reason and one reason only. Someday my daughter is going to look up what happened to her father. I did not want the answer she finds to be a sentence I chose out of a hunger to hurt him. I wanted the answer to be true, which it is, that he took money on my death and hid that I was alive, and that the court made him give it back, and that her mother chose not to spend the rest of his life the way he had spent her death. Let the paper say I was alive. Let the paper say he was made to answer. Let it stop there. That was not weakness? I want to be clear about that, because people confuse the two. It was the most deliberate thing I did in the whole affair. Cruelty would have been easy. Mercy took a plan. The apology came in the fall, on a porch. Not Shane's. Shane's consequences moved through the system on their own schedule, without any help from me, and I made a decision early that I would not spend my daughter's childhood feeding on them. But Roberta came to the small house I had rented across town, and she stood on the step, and she was smaller than she had ever been in my memory of her. I need to say it in person, she said. I believed him because it was easier than fighting him. That is the truth, and it is an ugly one. I planned a funeral for a woman who was alive, and I put my hands out for her child. And when the army called, I told my son not to call them back. I will carry that until I die. Her voice held barely. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking what you will let me have. I thought about Bex's sentence, the one from the first afternoon. People who have already spent the truth do not like it walking back in the door. Roberta had spent it, and she was standing on my porch not asking for it back, only asking what was left. Short visits, I said. Supervised to start in daylight. You do not take her anywhere without me. You do not talk to her about her father's case or about what happened in any version. If you can do that for a year, we will talk about more. That is more than I deserve, she said. It is not about what you deserve, I said. It is about what Sadie deserves. She deserves a grandmother. She does not deserve to learn that forgiveness means forgetting, and she does not deserve to learn hatred either. I am trying to find the third thing. This is the third thing. Roberta was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question I think she had driven across town to ask. Why are you giving me anything at all? She said. I would not if I were you. I planned your funeral. Tell me why. I had thought about that too on the nights I did not get in the car. Because I watched what it does to spend the truth, I said. I watched my husband decide a hard question was too expensive, and I watched it turn him into a man who could look at our daughter's face and choose a boat. I am not going to become the other version of that. I am not going to decide that my anger is worth more than her grandmother. That is the whole of it. It is not mercy for you. It is me refusing to catch what he had. He did not always used to be like that, Roberta said quietly. I know, I said. I married the part of him that was not. That is what I am burying now, not you. That. Roberta nodded, and she cried, And I did not comfort her, and I did not enjoy it either. I just let a hard, true moment be what it was. Then she left, and Sadie came out onto the porch in her socks and put her hand in mine, and we watched the street the way you watch a thing that is finally quiet. The year after is a shorter story because peace usually is. I went back on flight status in the spring. It was not automatic. There were medical boards and a flight surgeon who asked careful questions about the bells still ringing some mornings, and a long, slow clearance that I earned line by line the same way I earned everything else that year. But there is a morning at an airfield when the light comes up flat and gold across the tarmac and the aircraft sit there ticking as they warm, and I stood on the flight line with my name stenciled where it belonged, on my kit, on the manifest, on the schedule, in the world. The manifest is a small thing. It is a piece of paper with names and seat assignments, and I had spent months of my life fighting over a version of one, over a night when my name was on the wrong document and someone else's life was written into mine. So when the crew chief handed me the day's manifest and my name was on it, in the right place, next to the right aircraft, I stood there a beat too long, and he asked if everything was all right. "Everything is right," I said. "That is the whole thing. Everything is right." I climbed up, and I ran the checklist, every line of it, out loud, because a checklist is how I have always known I am alive, and I lifted off into a sky that had once been told I was not in it. The ground fell away. The valley opened up gold and green below me. And for the length of that flight, I was not a woman who had been declared dead and had to file to come back. I was just a pilot, doing the thing she was made to do, in the air where no paperwork could reach me. I flew a wreath out to a memorial that summer for the crew that was lost that night in March. And I stood at the back with my cover in my hand while a chaplain read names. And I made sure the woman whose identity had been given to mine was not a footnote in my story. She was the center of her own. I owed her that. I will owe her that for the rest of my life. The trust grew. I never touched it. Someday Sadie will, and someday when she is old enough, I will decide how much of this to tell her. Maybe all of it. Maybe that her mother was written down as gone and spent a season proving she was here. Maybe that the truth is not automatic, that sometimes you have to file for it, that being alive can require a judge. She will make of it what she makes of it. We have a small house now, quieter than the old one, with a shelf in her room. On the shelf there is a brown horse with a black mane, a little worn now, because it turns out a stuffed horse held tight enough for a year and a half loses some of its stuffing. And on the wall there is a photograph of the two of us, taken on the porch, and there is no ribbon on it, and there never will be. Sadie asked me once, in the plain way children ask the largest questions, whether I had really been dead. We were doing dishes. I dried my hands, and I crouched down to her height, because some answers you should not give from above. "No," I said. "I was never dead. Some people made a mistake, and then one person decided the mistake was easier than the truth. But I was always alive, and I was always coming home to you, every single day, even the days you could not see me." "Even when the picture had the ribbon," she said. "Even then," I said. "The ribbon was wrong. I took it down. Mommy is right here." She thought about that with the whole seriousness of 5.5 years, and then she handed me another plate to dry, which is exactly the right thing to do with the truth once you have decided to believe it. Put it down and go on with the dishes. I have tried to learn that from her. Beck still lives next door to the old place. I go by sometimes. She keeps a spare key to the new house, too, because some habits are just love with a lock on them. If my story has taught you anything, let it be this. There are people who will decide you are gone because it is easier than fighting for you, or because your absence pays better than your presence. When that happens, do not scream and do not disappear to match the story they wrote. Be patient, keep your papers, gather the small, hard facts that no grief and no theater can argue with, and put them in a folder and hand them to the process. And let the process do what it is built to do. Stay exactly as alive as you are. It is the one thing they cannot take back, and in the end, it is the only thing you need. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that the truth can walk back in the door. If you have ever been counted out by the people who should have counted you, I would be honored if you told me a little of your story in the comments, especially if you have worn the uniform or waited at home for someone who did. And if you would like more stories about courage, justice, and hope, consider subscribing so the next one finds you. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. Thank you for letting me be here and heard and alive. The end.